This is Global Order. I'm Hindol Sengupta. I'm thrilled that India's preeminent nuclear scientist has joined me today. Dr. Anil Kakodkar is here because I requested him that I wanted to talk to him about what's going to happen in the India US nuclear agreement, civil nuclear agreement, and indeed in India's nuclear power sector after recent dramatic news that the US was finally going to remove three key Indian entities from the entity list, so to speak, that they had been put on after the 1998 nuclear test. Dr. Kakodkar, welcome.
Thank you.
Let me then put to you at the very beginning, sir, how do you see this recent announcement that these three entities are going to be shifted from this entity list by the US administration?
Well, I don't have full details. I only know whatever came in the media. But on the face of it, it looks a good step forward. Removal of three Indian institutions from the entity list, as the news said. Uh, I think it augurs well for furthering the US India civil nuclear cooperation. I say this because after the civil nuclear cooperation agreement was signed, uh, the idea was that it should help growth of nuclear energy in India. And in a manner of speaking, for example, now that India is able to get uranium from the global market, uh, it has kind of added to nuclear capacity, both improvement of the capacity factor for reactors operating at that time, and also addition of new capacities and more such plants. But there was also an expectation that we would build more reactors, the TWS, from Westinghouse, for example. And now that has not really happened. And in my view, I have been holding this view right since the beginning. And that is because it was a kind of a cooperation based on the vendor buyer relationship. A reactor built elsewhere and then set up in India is bound to be far more expensive compared to the reactor where the 100% value addition takes place in India. And now, so I think this cooperation based on vendor buyer relationship needs to move forward uh, to a relationship where it is based on uh, a more comprehensive collaboration rather than vendor buyer relationship. It is kind of a development cooperation working together to address the issue of nuclear energy and so on and so forth. And so the opening of links between Indian institutions and American industry should, in fact, facilitate that in multiple ways. And that, in my view, augurs well. So I think on the face of it, it's a welcome development, although one has to wait and see the details.
Glad you mentioned Westinghouse because now that organizations and institutions like the Bhabha Atomic Research Centre and the Indira Gandhi Atomic Research Centre have been taken away or off that list, do you see deals like the Westinghouse deals or similar deals come on board sooner and more quickly in the near future?
Well, in the sense, for example, take the case of Westinghouse reactors. Uh, if there could be a more comprehensive collaboration between Westinghouse, and both Indian entities as well as Indian institutions like BARC, IGCAR, and others. Uh, I think that should help a quicker value addition activities in India on the Westinghouse reactors. And that will certainly make those products much cheaper. In fact, the cost may come down to half or even less, and then it will become viable. And there, of course, the Indian industry, along with Westinghouse, would have to play a role. But Indian institutions also can play an important role and contribution. There are other opportunities where one could co-develop products which would further nuclear cooperation between the two countries.
One of the questions that some people have asked is that this might make access to uranium easier for India once again. And because this access was blocked, India really worked hard to develop indigenous capabilities using thorium, which was available in India. And now that uranium might become easily accessible, perhaps it might dent the progress of indigenous capabilities. How do you see this question?
Well, I don't see it that way. In fact, if you look at India's energy requirements, particularly, one is you have to decarbonize the existing energy systems, and nuclear energy has to play a major role in that decarbonization. And even more important is the additional energy uh, that we have to find to support further development, because for India to be counted among the developed countries of the world, you would require something like four times the current level of energy use. And that additional energy will have to essentially come entirely from nuclear, in my view. So now, translated in terms of generating capacity, it will translate into a couple of thousand gigawatts, which is an astronomical number. And as far as uranium, particularly the way the world is using uranium in once through mode, even at the level of around 40, 50 gigawatts, you will find India's uranium requirement will rise to something like 10-15% of global uranium production currently. And that beyond the, anything beyond that is clearly untenable, because the prices will become very, very volatile. So to me, it looks that thorium uh, it remains a key answer to meeting the larger energy requirements in India. And India has the domestic three-stage nuclear power program, which, of course, remains as important today as it was any time before. But that has its own timeline, in the sense one has to go through the development of fast reactors and subsequently the thorium reactors and the fuel cycle facilities in between. Now, whereas because of this requirement of both development as well as decarbonization or net zero, these time cycles are 2047 for being developed country and 2070 for net zero. To achieve these within this time scale with this three-stage program, there is a little mismatch. But I think access to uranium has been created already by the Civil Nuclear Cooperation, which was launched earlier, and that uh, is going on already. So it's not as if at this moment access to global uranium is not a problem, and that now can be leveraged by introducing thorium in existing heavy water reactors. And if you do that, then while we produce energy without losing extra uranium, because it's actually it makes it more efficient in terms of even uranium use. But you also produce significant quantities of fissile material uranium 233, which comes out of thorium. And so you can start a parallel approach to the time-tested three-stage program to sort of grow the nuclear program. You can start thorium reactors a little bit earlier. Of course, its growth will be slow initially, but when the three-stage program catches up, we can catch up with the growth. So I think the two are quite consistent and synergistic in my view.
I also want to ask you, you mentioned the ambitious program that India has for nuclear, nearly 9 to 10% by 2047. How do you see this goal?
Well, I see this as an absolute essential. It's very challenging, and so certainly we'll have to find new ways and new solutions to realize such high goals. But the I would say it's a development imperative for India. For example, if the nuclear energy doesn't play its intended role, not 9 or 10%, but uh, because the in a net zero situation in India, uh, the options are renewable energy, including hydro, bioenergy, and nuclear. Now, renewable energy, including hydro, is not going to be more than maybe maximum one third of the total need. It cannot meet more than that. The remaining need has to come necessarily from nuclear and a small part from bioenergy. So to me, it looks it's a development imperative. And if it is not realized, if we don't reach that, it would mean that the development will remain compromised to that extent. So I see it that way. It's not as if this or that. There is no other alternative to reach the level of development to be comparable with developed countries of the world.
How do you see India's own plans with the rest of the world's plans towards nuclear?
Well, India is, for example, currently there is this fleet mode construction going on for the 700 megawatt PHWRs, and I hope there'll be more fleets added. Right now, a fleet of 10 reactors is sanctioned, and that plus the reactors sanctioned earlier, there are something like uh, I think 15 reactors under construction, and one is almost under commissioning. Uh, but uh, then that's over and above the reactors already under operation. But I am sure there'll be more fleets added. Uh, so that will be the one workhorse. Recently, this announcement of Bharat Small Reactor, which is essentially provision of captive capacity for hard to abate industry. I think government has, or Nuclear Power Corporation has issued a request for proposal. That is a good sign, and one has to wait and see how it moves forward. But what I hear is that can easily create a demand of say 40, 50 gigawatts. So and I'm sure there'll be more things to happen. So I think things are picking up momentum, but clearly much more needs to be done. And also, while doing this, as I said earlier, we can't be depending on uranium alone because it will be very hard to get so much of uranium uh, either from within the country because Indian ores are very lean, so the uranium is more expensive. Although there is quantity-wise, we have explored enough uranium there. And globally, it will become a sizable fraction of the global uh, sort of production. So it's going to be a challenge. And so as we grow PHWR capacity and also the fast reactor, the second stage of program, I think it's time now to accelerate introduction of thorium in PHWRs and soon thereafter take up thorium reactors, which will be anyway consistent with the third phase. So I think the two will go sync. So, uh, but one will have to wait and see how things pan out.
What about persistent fears in the past about the safety of nuclear power plants? Do you think that is an issue that we have come, way beyond?
Well, that obviously that was an issue following Chernobyl and later the Fukushima. But I think globally, nuclear community has taken lessons. A lot of improvements have been done. For example, there is now movement about small and medium reactor. Now that has many different types of reactors. Not all would kind of qualify the description which I am making. But some of them that are talking about reactors which will not require any exclusion radius, for example, or exclusion distance between the reactor and the population or the external domain. And that would mean that obviously that technology has gone to a level where the you know the reactor can be safe enough for people to live just at the plant boundary. And so it is this direction that even in India we had done this advanced heavy water reactor development, where we had actually shown that the reactor can be set up without any exclusion distance. So, so that is one. But talking about PHWRs are, in my view, safer compared to other reactors simply because these reactors have a lot of heat sink right within the reactor core. You know, it contains cold moderator, large quantity, which is almost at room temperature. So it can absorb a lot of heat to prevent really very high temperature, which can create really the problem. So, plus there are characteristics in terms of very low excess reactivity. There are advantages in terms of neutron lifetime, which is longer in case of heavy water reactor. So there are, I think, several advantages, and I have always maintained, for example, the 700 megawatt reactors which have been set up. The colleagues in NPC tell me that safety-wise, in fact, they say that there will be literally no impact in public domain, even in the 700 megawatt units, although we maintain an exclusion. So these reactors are quite safe. And I'm not talking about only in India. I think worldwide there is this transition. So if you actually collect data, even accounting for the fact that there have been these accidents at uh, Chernobyl and Fukushima, if you look at the track record from the beginning of nuclear power or nuclear energy till now, and ask a question as to fatalities per unit of electricity produced, nuclear power will turn out to be the safest. So there is that perceptional problem, and there are ways of softening that perception itself, but the design has improved quite a bit. So I think today we are talking about quite a different kind of paradigm compared to what it was earlier.
How do we explain to the this everything that you've just explained? What is the best way that the government can explain this to communities which still harbor this fear? Because if we really have to push up nuclear power, there will many sort of units have to come up in various parts of the country, and there could be communities who still harbor this fear. What do you think is the best way to allay their fears?
Well, I think this is a continuous process. The public awareness program uh, has to be an ongoing activity, and at any point of time, there will be always need to do more. So this is, well, we should be very clear about that. But having said that, uh, the people experiencing the benefits uh, is something that changes. They take, for example, take aircraft industry. Initial stage, people were scared of getting into aircrafts for civil travel. Today, that is not the case. That is because people are, it's not that the accidents don't take place, but people see the benefit. Now, looking at the global warming issue, uh, the net zero has become very important. And in terms of the risks to mankind, the the global warming is a much bigger killer. So, and today there is everybody who is more or less convinced, I think, that nuclear is the solution. There is at least at the international level, among the people who know, there is consensus that nuclear is really the solution for addressing global warming or realizing net zero. Now, when people at large see the benefits of nuclear power like that, slowly the remaining part of the community also will come to term. But frankly, the public awareness activity has to be an ongoing activity. And that's the way I would look at it.
I want to ask you, sir, finally, how do you see this in context of India-US ties? This is many people think that this was long pending. India had been accepted in many clubs, even without signing two key agreements, of course. And yet, this final step, was long pending and long overdue. Do you think this, in a sense, is a giant leap?
Well, I think that only time will tell. But for me, even at that time, uh, that is the cooperation had come to the point of vendor-buyer relationship. That itself is important. But in Indian context, the cost of electricity is also very important. And so there is a lot of merit, as I said earlier, to domestic value addition. And I think this new initiative should sort of help significantly in that direction. In the sense, one could carry out new innovation together, one could carry out new product development together, because India has a lot of experience. So it can also contribute, just like US can contribute, India can also contribute. And together, I think a lot can happen both for benefit of India, I would say benefit of United States, and also benefits of other third countries. And such things can happen through this collaboration. But how much it will be realized, I think time only will tell. It's a question of, because there are rules on both sides, there are legalities on both sides. So, but clearly, this is an important step forward. That is definite.
Kakodkar, we will leave it at that. Thanks very much. No doubt we will have more opportunities to talk to you as this entire story develops and we see how this actually pans out on the ground, as you're saying. But for now, thanks very much for your time, to taking off time to explain to us the nuances of this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you.